wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Welcome in to AWA Unleashed. We are the preeminent #1 podcast dedicated to telling the stories and reliving the memories of the American Wrestling Association. Apologies for the beginning of the video, may have been a couple of seconds off, but we are here. We are ready to go. My name is Chris Tubbs. Let us bring in the big nipple, Joe Chupik, and the little nipple, Mick Karch. I don't know if that's a thing, but we can't have two big nipples. So you can either be the medium-sized nipple or you can give yourself another, moniker, but that's.
And you are Chandler Bing. You are the third nipple.
I am the third. Oh, rest in peace, Matthew Perry.
Absolutely.
Rest in peace, Matthew Perry. How you doing, guys?
Good.
Doing very well and looking forward to this show.
This is a show, guys, that I kind of wanted to do for a while. We've had a lot of requests for this, but this is kind of one that I kind of pushed it, but I know that you guys, especially you, Mick, this is one that's going to be personal, a little more personal for you, but I feel like this is one that individuals have wanted to, we've wanted to discuss, and we'll get to that in just a minute, along with a passing, or not a passing, an anniversary here in a minute. But we do want to tell you, first of all, for those that, if you like the banter at the beginning, I know some people are like, well, we don't like the banter. That's just too bad, because this is the fun part for it. The whole thing's fun. But here's what I want to do. I'm going to put a banner down there. Subscribe to the AWA Unleashed YouTube channel. That is a great way to help us expand. It's a great way to help us kind of continue to build this thing, because we've got some really cool things that are on the horizon, guys. Like I'm telling you, we just got a few more, T's to cross, I's to dot, a few more things, but we've got some really cool things to really expand this thing, and we're super excited. But we want you guys along for the ride. Just if you have not subscribed, hit that like button and leave us a rating, review, comment, whatever. Like it all helps with the algorithm. Or if you're, if you listen on any other podcast platform, hey, that's cool. Google Music, Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, Apple, whatever they're calling it nowadays. Just any platform that you're on, just to hit the like button, subscribe, follow us, and our AWA Unleashed fan book page as well. Okay. And also thanks to 7th Avenue Pizza and Soda Stick for what they do. So before we get into the topic today, Mick, I'm going to send it over to you for an anniversary. Again, a personal anniversary for you guys.
Yeah, it doesn't seem possible. And we just mentioned last week his championship victory in 1975, but this anniversary is a little more painful. And 8 years ago today, as we're taping this broadcast, Nick Bockwinkel passed away at his home in Las Vegas. I'll never forget, I woke up in the middle of the night just to check something on the computer, 4:30 in the morning, and there I see, we're saddened by the death of Nick Bockwinkel. And Nick had a tough couple of last years in his life. But just I saw him in April of 2015 at Cauliflower Alley, and then November of 2015 he was no longer with us. So certainly in my estimation, the GOAT, the greatest of all time, and miss the guy, miss our conversations, miss the ribs, miss those phone calls, and I know, Joe, you feel exactly as I do.
You're right. There's a lot of goats. You know, that term gets used quite a bit along with legend, icon. Nick Bockwinkel truly was one of the goats.
Yeah.
Incredible person outside of the ring, a cretinous humanoid inside the ring. And the fact that it's 8 years, holy shit.
Yeah.
It just, the older you get, the faster that it goes. And sadly, we've lost too many of them. And today's 8-year anniversary of Nick, just a reminder of, to me, of who he was. And that was the guy who liked to pull a rib. And he loved to say, Mick, my boy.
My boy, yeah.
And despite the lengthy conversations that, well, that's not fair. A lengthy speech by Nick, you just happened to be there listening.
There you go. There was no conversation.
No, very, very little interactions with Nick, but that was part of his charm. And
was he like the king of the monologue, I guess, then? Is that safe to say?
Monologue, filibuster, whatever you want to say. I mean, he, like Heenan said, ask Nick what time it is and he'll tell you how to build a watch. And it was exactly like that. And God bless him. What a guy.
Yeah.
What a guy. And as you said, Joe, the fact that it's 8 years, my God, time is going by quickly.
You brought up, Mick, that you had woken up at 4:30 in the morning. A similar thing had happened to me where I woke up from a dead sleep, not knowing why, just thinking it was whatever. And it was about 4, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I rolled back over and slept for a little bit longer. And when I finally woke up, looked at my phone, and I got the news that he had passed, and I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah.
It was expected, sadly. I remember talking to his wife, Darlene, probably about 3 months prior to his death, asking if it'd be all right to call Nick, knowing where he was, where his state of mind was. And I had to deal with that with my own father. And she goes, Joe, you're always welcome to call Nick, but just, be prepared and don't be offended if he doesn't remember who you were or who you are. And I don't know, I didn't make that call to him to talk to him one last time. Part of me wishes that I did. Another part is glad that I didn't, because I could remember more what he was, the Nick Bockwinkel that I remembered, as opposed to just talking to somebody that might not have any clue who I am. And I didn't want to disrupt Nick. I just let him be. I said my piece with him, and rest in peace, Nick. And by the way, you did your job well.
He certainly did. And Nick, I forgive you for 1975 at the Minneapolis Auditorium when I saw you come walking in the building, saw you down the hall, all the way down the hall, and you waved to me for, hey, Mick. And I, people are looking like, oh God, but look at these guys. What a relationship. And Nick, when he finally made his approach to me, he said, I gotta tell you, you look worse every time I see you. And so that was the charm. The man slapped me across the face for no reason at Cauliflower Alley Club. He hit me with his walker. He hit me with a golf club, but all endearing. And God bless you. God bless you, Nick. There you go.
Yeah. You mentioned the word goat, Joe. You said it perfectly. There are a lot of goats, but I feel like he's our goat. And I feel like I missed out on something special with Nick Bockwinkel. And you guys, I'm glad we're able to do this podcast because you guys are the only ones that can tell stories like that. of those little things about Nick Bockwinkel that you can't get online. So thank you guys for sharing that, even though it's a somber anniversary, but it brings back those good memories for you guys.
Well,
Yeah, and Nick would be more philosophical than anybody. He'd say, "Come on, get on with it, guys. That's enough. Go ahead now, get on with your podcast, get on with your bullshit." I think he would probably say, and
enough about me. Go on,
there
boy.
you go. There you go.
Yeah. All right. Well, today we're going to discuss somebody that had a lot of success in a lot of territories. I don't think there was a place where she did not go that she was not revered, whether it was positive, whether it was negative. Let me just say, you can call her a lot of things. You can call her scary. You can call her sensational, but she is the one and only Sherri Martel. And I'm glad that we can discuss her because I feel like she had such a broad, like reach with who she was and what she did. We talk about Bobby Heenan being able to perform and do a lot of different things. I feel like she was kind of in the same vein, guys, where you could ask her to do anything in any territory, and I feel like she was able to do it.
First of all, I think the fact that you said she when you were kind of teasing who was going to be on, I think that's great. Finally, we got a she, that we're spotlighting here. And if there ever was a she to be spotlighted, it was Sherri Martel. Uh, I know, Chris, you're going to kind of give an overview about what she did in the business on the overall, which was extraordinary. If you look up Sherri Martel's history in wrestling, she did everything, as you said, went everywhere, did everything, and did it to a T. Her AWA tenure, which we will focus on more on a personal level than a professional level, her AWA tenure was relatively short. She came in about 1985. By the end of 1987, she was gone. But what an impact! And as I said, we're going to talk more about the personal side, the intensity, and yet the beauty of Sherri Martel.
Yeah.
Both of the monikers, before let you get into it, Chris, sensational and scary, epitomize who Sherri Martel was.
Yeah.
She was indeed both, and we'll get into more of those details as we go on.
Yeah. And I guess I wanted to start by, we talked to some individuals that they're like, oh, I didn't have any athletic background. I didn't do, like, you look at what she did as a kid, playing basketball and track and field. She had that athletic build. And I remember, like, just very distinctly the first time that I saw her, there was just something about her. And I think that when you add the fact that she was trained by Moolah, I think and I know this, we're kind of skipping, we have bullet points, but I've already screwed that up. I'm so excited to talk about Sherri, you guys, that being trained by Moolah, I feel just adds another level of credibility to women in that business.
What's interesting about her being trained by Moolah, and Joe, you can certainly speak to this in terms of Sherri's personality. You've a lot of times referred to pro wrestlers as grown-up teenagers, and sometimes that's a good thing. When it's innocent, sometimes it's not so good when it pushes the envelope a little bit. Sherri was kind of a wild child, and when she went to Moolah's camp, she originally, I believe, approached Grizzly Smith, Jake the Snake Roberts' father, about getting into the business. Sherri's mom had taken her to a wrestling show, and Sherri decided, that's what I want to do. Well, Grizzly Smith then sent Sherri off to Fabulous Moolah, and despite the fact that Sherri had these incredible skills, she was still that wild child, and Moolah was kind of a disciplinarian. and she wasn't all that comfortable sometimes with Sherri's behavior. The kid was still inside, and that wasn't a good thing necessarily when Lillian was trying to train you to become a pro wrestler.
I'm sorry. The laughter is just you hit it right on the head. Moolah knew it. Sherri,
Yeah.
she was that grown up teenager, and I'm laughing because I'm seeing her at interview day. She would go out there and turn into scary Sherri during the interview. And then I'd count down 3, 2, 1, it'd be done. And boom, she's this sweetheart, who she was. But if you pissed her off, she went straight back to scary Sherri really quick.
Yeah, I've got some personal stories about not necessarily pissing her off, but seeing that side of her where, okay, I think I'll just be over here right now. And sometimes, again, that was a good thing. That was part of her appeal.
Let me. What was the first impression that you guys got of her? The first time that you guys met her when she came into Minneapolis?
I personally got a phone call from her out of the blue. And this is when I'm just, I wasn't involved in TV yet. I was doing photography for the AWA and some publicity for Wally and Vern. And I get a call, this is Sherri Martel, and Wally Carbo told me to give you a call because I'm coming into the AWA for the first time. And look at that. Wow, that goes back a little bit in time. Early Sherri Martel. And she said, Wally says, for whatever reason, I don't know where the hell Wally got this idea. He says, you might find him to be an expert on the Twin Cities. Well, I'm not an expert on my bathroom. Well, maybe I am. But Sherri was asking about places to live and so on and so forth, and just kind of getting the lay of the land in the AWA. Very, very soft spoken. She had that sweet voice over the telephone. The first time I met her directly in person, she was working a show. I want to say it might have been against Candy Divine in St. Paul. And Sherri was, let's say she had a couple of Coca-Colas before getting to the arena. So she was, feeling okay. And I have put that picture up before. We won't do it this time, where she posed for a picture. And, she wasn't covered up altogether. Sherri was getting ready for her match, but her wardrobe was kind of malfunctioning a little bit, and her eyes are a little bit glazed over. That was the first time that I met Sherri when she came to town. But again, as you said, Chris or Joe, boom, the bell rings, the lights come on, and you would never have known that, Sherri had anything but a glass of water. And that was the first time I met her. And from then on, it was a friendship that lasted many years.
First time I had met Sherri was during an interview day at the AWA. And she came in pre-makeup. And I was like, whoa, okay. I mean, when I'm talking pre-makeup, I'm going back to, it looks like she just rolled out of bed 5 minutes ago, hopped into the car and came to the studio. Half hour, 45 minutes later, she's up for her first interview. She came up all dolled up, looking like $1 million. And that was my first introduction to Sherri Martel. And during that same interview day, she didn't like what somebody had said to her. And this was in between interviews. And that was my first exposure to the scary Sherri part. She was a proverbial light switch. She could go from sweet and innocent to don't you dare fucking say or do that to me, and then go back to being the sweet and innocent. her range of of emotions, shall we say, was great and wide.
Any idea what would trigger that, or was it just kind of one of those things? Did you guys feel like maybe
she did
Okay.
not put up with shit?
That's
Okay.
exactly it. That is, you hit it right on the head, Joe. She was ahead of her time. Sad to say, she was a woman ahead of her time because she's in a man's business,
Mhm.
and and she knew what she was up against, and she didn't care if you were Hulk Hogan, right down to the guy pushing the broom in the ring. If you did something that offended her, she got in your face, she let you know. And like Joe said, the next minute, and not that she's manic or anything, I'm not trying to say that, but the next minute, you got to see Sherri as sweet, lovable Sherri, and my God, what a beautiful, beautiful person she was.
Yeah, you got to remember, Chris, that we're talking about a time well before the acknowledgement of women's wrestling. Women's wrestling today,
Yeah.
nothing like it was.
Do you feel like maybe there was a chip on the shoulder too, though, because she had to work harder because she was a woman?
No doubt about it. No doubt
Okay.
about it. Sherri came into the business at a time when women's wrestling was still a novelty.
Yeah.
It was the same as the Battle Royal, the same as Little People, the midget wrestlers, they call it. No disrespect intended. And in women's wrestling, it was not a part of a run.
Sure.
They weren't going to have a 6-month angle run with women's wrestlers. So Sherri had to fight and claw her way to where she eventually ended up getting with the WWF. And so having that, not chip on her shoulder, but she just didn't put up with shit from anybody.
Yeah.
And I mean anybody.
Yeah, let me ask you guys about the relationship that she had with, I mean, maybe the two that she's most synonymous with, the AWA, with Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. What was I know that she kind of had this relationship with Buddy Rose going back before before they, did their run in the AWA. But I mean, what was that? What did you see between those two? Was that like something that was put together and it just happened to work because of booking, or kind of like was it just like a genuine connection? I mean, how did that all come about?
First of all, you mentioned Sherri's early connection with Buddy Rose. She was a valet for Buddy Rose, probably 3, 4, 5 years before she came into the AWA area. She valeted at the time when Buddy was working for WWF. There's Buddy and Sherri. That's actually a shot at Sherri's apartment in Richfield, Minnesota, back in about 1986. But Sherri valeted for Buddy. I don't know if you got a picture there or not, Chris. There was one photograph with Buddy and the Grand Wizard.
Oh, yes, I do. Yep, I've got it.
Let's bring that one up, and we'll kind of give a little history there.
Let's see here. Hold on.
There you got her.
Yeah, I've got it. There it is. Okay. Yep. Give me a second there.
No problem. No problem at all. There we go. Now this is what I was talking about. There's Sherri, of course, on your right, Buddy Rose, and that's Judy Martin, another of the great lady wrestlers and the Grand Wizard. So Sherri is coming to the ring. She's escorting Playboy Buddy Rose in all his Playboy glory back in the day. So she's just kind of a side attraction, even back then, even though she had trained as a wrestler. But that's the first connection between Sherri and Buddy. So they had that established connection already by the time she came to the AWA. As far as who actually put it together, Joe, you may know more than I do. I'm guessing it was just one of those things when she came to the AWA, in terms of, let's see if this works, putting her together with Buddy Rose and Doug Summers. Of course, she managed other people in the AWA.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the particulars, just because when Sherri came into the AWA and was put up with Rose and Summers, I had just like sort of started. I was green in the industry, so the behind the scenes stories. But Mick, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Wasn't Sherri's debut with Rose and Summers at Wrestle Rock?
I don't. Boy, I don't remember. I thought it was prior to that, but I don't know.
It may have been, but for me, that was Sherri's coming out party. She was dressed in that pink dress, and she ended up winning the Women's Battle Royal to win the championship.
It's interesting, Joe. And again, somebody will call us on it, so we want to be careful and not, mess up the time frame here. But as an aside, look at that shot. I mean, that is, I took that picture at Wrestle Rock, and of course, they were two buddies of mine at the time. So they, pointed me out and looked at the camera, and there you got that going. It was just tremendous. Here's what's interesting about what I see as the connection and just how damn good Sherri was, no matter who came up with the idea to put it together. Sherri is in the business at that point, I don't know, maybe 5 years or so. And Buddy Rose and Doug Summers in the AWA, it was an interesting tag team because they put together two guys who really did not have a lot of success in their prior AWA time. Paul Pershman, of course, Buddy Rose. His most infamous moment in the AWA was probably when he refereed the Bockwinkel Gagne title switch. Doug Summers had been a journeyman wrestler for many years in the AWA, never got barely to mid-card status. And the AWA at that time was starting its kind of over-the-top decline a little bit. But they put Sherri Martel, a relative unknown, with these two guys who had an established record in the AWA as, okay, yeah, well, whatever. And the magic that they delivered. And Rose and Summers are, 10, 15-year veterans at this point. And I would argue that Sherri Martel was every bit as important and every bit as stellar in that threesome as Rose and Summers were. She stepped up to the plate. And a lot of times, when people think of Buddy Rose and Doug Summers, they think of
Sherri Martel.
She was that goddamn good. And so to me, it was a marriage made in heaven. It was just that good.
What I find funny about the Summers Rose Sherri pairing is that I think about the blood feud that they had with the Midnight Rockers. And then, she really, the AWA was on their decline. I feel where she really got her notoriety was in the WWF.
Sure.
When she managed Shawn Michaels right after his heel turn against Marty Jannetty. And, you had the Heartbreak Kid, and all of a sudden here's Sherri Martel, who was on the other side in the AWA. And then next thing you know, there she is with Shawn Michaels. And I feel like, talk about, maybe elevating Rose and Summers. I feel like you can make the case, at least to me, Shawn Michaels doesn't become the villain, the bad guy in the WWF right after that if he doesn't have Sherri Martel.
He acknowledges that. Shawn Michaels is the first guy that will say that. That was how good Sherri Martel was, that her presence elevated Shawn Michaels to that major heel status. And Chris and Joe, like you just said, Chris, it's interesting. You have this irony, the history with Buddy Rose early on there, Sherri and Shawn. Shawn, boy toy. And
Shawn!
Yeah, careful, you hurt yourself there. Now,
I know. I can't do that anymore.
No, you can't. But Sherri starts off with Buddy Rose as his valet in WWF, comes to the AWA, manages him against Michaels and Jannetty, and then reconnects with Shawn Michaels in the WWF. So the cycle completed itself, but every single time, it was just magic. The transition was there. And I would argue again, I think she elevated Shawn Michaels to another level.
No doubt, but the scary Sherri of the WWF at that time wouldn't have been possible without the sensational Sherri of the AWA. And you brought up the blood feud earlier, Chris, and I've brought it up so many times on this podcast. Where Rose and Summers and Sherri got put on the map for me was that incredible, one of the best matches I've ever been a part of production-wise, was Rose and Summers, the first big bloodbath, Rose and Summers with Sherri against the Midnight Rockers. If you get the opportunity, go onto YouTube. I'm sure it's out there. Take a look at that match, but watch what Sherri does during that match. She was as good as any manager there was in the business at that time during that match. Why? Because you believe that she was the bitch that she was portraying herself to be. And she pulled it off incredibly well.
Joe, that to me, that's it in a nutshell. I mean, you nailed it right there. First of all, in terms of that feud, the most underrated feud in the history of wrestling. I mean, I don't care what you say.
You can make that case. I don't, and that's not being hyperbolic, Mick. I feel like that's true, because the AWA was just kind of, I mean, it was kind of trudging along, but it's one of those things that I don't think people really recognize how fucking good that was.
Think about that. And you're right, Chris. You've got these two veterans, as I said before, that were kind of like floundering in their previous AWA appearances. You got Michaels and Jannetty, who are just really getting their feet wet in the business. And then you add Sherri to the mix, which is, giving her first real national exposure. So it all came together at one time. Rose and Summers finally hit their peak. Michaels and Jannetty are learning from Rose and Summers as they go. So arguably, Rose and Summers made superstars out of Michaels and Jannetty. And then you add Sherri to the mix, and it was just magic. And Joe, you made such a great point about Sherri. There was such a believability about her. It was kind of like she might have been the female Bruiser Brody, in the sense that when the cameras were off, for the most part, mild-mannered, soft-spoken, you could be having this conversation with her. And man, you put her under those Klieg lights in the middle of the ring, and you believed that Sherri was that bitch, because she believed it. And she made, oh God, what a gorgeous picture of her that is. She made so many people look good. So many of the guys look good. And you mentioned the chip on her shoulder a little bit earlier on. She's in this man's world, and damn it, she was not going to be overshadowed. First of all, she was as tough as most of the guys. I mean, legitimately. You didn't want to go toe-to-toe with her. And then, Joe, you made the comment about how good a manager she was. She was so animated, and she was so involved, and she would throw these tantrums at ringside. And then when the referee was distracted, she would go in with the choke, or, take off her shoe and hit the opponent over the head with it, or kick, whatever it might have been. And you compare that to somebody like a Miss Elizabeth, or, and that's not to denigrate Liz, because that was her role too. But Sherri was an active participant in the matches. She wasn't just eye candy. She was as good as anybody else.
And so there was a time after Sherri started. In fact, this would have been right after the Rose and Summers, the initial Rose and Summers Midnight Rockers bloodbath. Sherri, let's see, probably a good 6 to 8 months worth. And I made the comment to her about her abilities outside the ring, standing there, being the valet, manager, whatever you want to call it. And admittedly, it was probably tongue in cheek at the time, but looking back on it, it was actually legit. And I had told her, I said, I have not seen a manager in the AWA get as much heat to get as much heat since Bobby Heenan. And looking back on it, there was a lot of similarities between the two, because you knew when Sherri was ringside that some shit was going to go down, whether it was involved in the match or just Sherri being that bitch that she needed to be as a manager for somebody. But
yeah, I was gonna mention that, Joe, that, and I'll let you jump back in the Bobby, but I felt like maybe that might have been, I mean, because as much as we talk about Bobby Heenan, I'm like, I see a lot of similarities, but would I have been out of line for saying that?
not at all. I got to add in Adnan as well. I mean, the three most hated managers in AWA history, I think, are the three that we just talking about. Sherri deserves every accolade that we have given, but we've not touched so much yet on her wrestling abilities. And Sherri Martel was as good as it got as a female wrestler, as a woman wrestler. Her early matches against Candy Divine, spectacular.
Yeah, well, that's a perfect segue, Joe, because I want to ask you guys, because of her toughness as a wrestler with Candy Divine and then the matches she had with Medusa, did that add to the credibility that, yeah, she's out there, but she can mess you up and she can become a legit factor? It's believability because she was so tough as a wrestler on her own.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Great point. And a couple of things. First, to Joe's point about Sherri, and the comparison to Bobby Heenan. First of all, out of the blue, you get a female manager in the AWA. To my knowledge, there had not been one before. I could be wrong, but I don't remember an actual manager of a heel tag team or singles wrestler in the AWA. Secondly, as it relates to Sherri's toughness, that might be the difference between her and Bobby Heenan. When Bobby would get into the ring, he got the shit kicked out of him. And that's what he did. He bumped, he sold. People couldn't wait for Bobby Heenan to get into the ring with the Crusher, and pop goes the Weasel. That's what they look for. With Sherri Martel, everything about Sherri was tough. I don't remember a time where Sherri came off in an interview timid or afraid or backing down from a challenge or worming her way out of a match like Bobby did. Bobby, if you said, you're getting in the ring with Mad Dog Vachon, well, you can't do that to me, blah, blah, blah. Sherri was not like that. Sherri welcomed the challenge, male, female, man, or beast, and held her own with everybody. And you're right, Chris. That's the credibility factor of Sherri Martel. She was the real deal.
And she was so confident in herself. Maybe this story will shed some light on how confident she was. At one point, Sherri walked into the control room at the AWA, and she had a magazine. And the magazine is, well, let's put it this way. Sherri was in a gentleman's magazine. She was so proud of it and so confident in herself. She brought that magazine in and she showed me. I was 21 years old. And here's I'd never met somebody that was in an adult magazine, and that it very classfully done. I will say that. But I got to admit, it was a bit uncomfortable. It's like, looking at the magazine, looking at Sherri. But that was part of what Sherri was. Mm-hmm. She was so strong, so confident. So I don't give a shit what, that you're a male wrestler. I'm going to do something in this business. And she took that and she was able to do that very successfully for a long time Well, until sadly we no longer had her. But Sherri was, God, tough in real life, tough as a manager, tough as a wrestler, and tough as a ribber.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, you get to some ribs, guys, and then I want to ask you a couple of questions that might be a little uncomfortable, but I want to ask them anyway.
Well, yeah, she had a great sense of humor, and a lot of the guys would say Sherri's one of the boys, and that was a compliment because back then, you're going back 40 years almost. The women were not headlining pay-per-views. They didn't have the financial pull that they do now. So a lot of times, the girls are on the show. Okay, well, they're eye candy. Not Sherri Martel. One night, I've told this story before. I want to get into the more personal side of Sherri. Sherri lived in an apartment complex in Richfield, Minnesota. I've mentioned this before, with Playboy Buddy Rose, and not in the same apartment, but in the same complex. Buddy Rose, Colonel De Beers, and Scott Hall all lived in the same Richfield complex. So every once in a while, we'd go over and to one of their apartments and watch tapes or something. And I don't recall what Sherri was doing at the time. I'm guessing, memory serves me, she was probably smoking a joint. And again, this is 35, 40 years ago. And out of the blue, there's that shot of Sherri and Buddy again. And and she was genuinely, she wasn't even schnockered. She was just having fun that night. Sherri looked at me and she said, "Hey, you want to hit?" I said, No, thanks. I don't do that. And Sherri said, "Well, you know what, McCarge? I do." And, she's about this far from me. And she says, "And let me tell you something. If you ever say a word to this about Vern Gagne, about what you saw in this apartment, I'm going to fix you so you are never with a woman again." And that's all it took. That is all it took. I don't think, it's amazing that I ever spoke to Vern again, let alone mention Sherri Martel, because I was shitting my pants. But that's the kind of a gal she was. That was the kind of relationship. And I forget what, I want to say this was either at the Metrodome or Met Center. I don't remember where, but I told Sherri, I says, "Come here. I want to get a picture with you, and I want you to put me over. I want you to look, at least pretend that you're happy to be taking this picture with me." And Sherri broke into this laughter, and that's when the cameraman took the picture. And honest to God, of all the wrestling stuff I have, this is right up there. This is just as important as anything else.
Yeah, Sherri pulled the first rib on me in the AWA. Well, in my time in the AWA. I think I'd shared this story before, so I'll do the Reader's Digest version. But coming home from Vegas after my very first taping, very first time in Vegas, of course, might not have slept the night before thanks to the rockers, and fell asleep on the airplane, only to wake up to Sherri Martel standing over me with lipstick in her hand, literally inches away from my face, trying to put makeup on my face. And I just said, "No, Sherri, no. I go, "How much did you get on me?" She goes, "None. I was just going to get started." Okay, I'm going into the bathroom to check this. As I go to stand up, she had tied my shoes to the chair to begin with. So, I stand up and sort of stumble into the seat ahead of me. The boys are all laughing, but she was telling the truth. I had no makeup on me, but I woke up just in time. And literally, Sherri Martel, her face, like this distance away. It was very, very close. Just, okay, getting ready to do it. Oh.
Well, it would be the first time probably that somebody else put lipstick on you. I mean, typically, you do that yourself, but it's here nor there.
Bored on any given weekend. Hey, what the hell? Give it a shot.
I get that.
I want to ask you guys about the rib. Was there a rib with Marty Jannetty before Wrestle Rock?
Oh, it's kind of a convoluted story, and it was a little bit scary, pardon the pun. Sherry was about 2 weeks out from working wrestle. She had attended, and I think I've told this. I think I've told this story before on the air. Sherry had attended an independent show in the Twin Cities that was promoted by Eddie Sharkey's PWA. She just wanted to go to a show. Turns out that it was at a place called the Alternative, which was a dry bar. Well, Sherry didn't know that it was a dry bar, and on the way there, one of the PWA referees was driving, and Sherry's got a little flask with her, and I said, Sherry, you can't do that. This is a dry bar. That's why they call it the Alternative, and you gotta keep it clean tonight. Well, who am I talking to? I'm talking to Sherri Martel. I might as well have just put up a red flag and said, Sherry, go to it. So Sherry goes into the building to watch this show, and she takes the flask of whatever it was, Jack Daniels, I don't know, and pours it, of course, into a can of Pepsi, and drinks down the Pepsi and drinks down another Pepsi, ba 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 ba. And before the end of the night, Sherry was not in a good mood. When Sherry would when Sherry would imbibe, her personality didn't always turn for the better. So we go back to Sherry's place after the show, and when we leave the show, it's sleeting in Minneapolis. It's getting into that in between season time, and Sherry takes a bump out in the parking lot on her knee. Well, first of all, she's blitzed going in, and now she falls directly on her knee. And I mean, she went down, and she's wailing. And I thought, oh, shit. This not only for Sherry, but for me, too. I'm done. AWA, you're not going to see me at ringside anymore. We go back to Sherry's place. She takes some aspirin. That was basically it. Well, then she gets a call from Marty Jannetty. And Marty says, I know you were at that show tonight. Everybody knows. She says, what are you talking about? And she said, well, they had a TV camera there, and Vern saw you sitting at this Rebel, competition independent wrestling show, and he is hot. And he wants to pull you off of Wrestle Rock completely. Sherry's already got she's already got a knee the size of a softball. She's already feeling half in the bag, and she starts crying. And she, oh no, oh my God. She threw us out. It was me and the referee, and I don't know who else. She said, you guys got to go. I got to go to bed, blah, 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 blah. I lost the Wrestle Rock. Well, now I'm thinking my career's over too. Not that anybody gave a shit at the time. But Sherry called me the next day, and she said, I talked to Marty, and it was a rib. There were no cameras. Vern had no idea about the show. So Marty had sent this poor woman into a tailspin. She threw us out on the Nicollet Avenue, in 494. We dodged traffic as we're rolling onto the highway. And it was all a rib. But I want to tell you, here it is, 35, 36, 37 years later. And it's like it happened last night. It was that memorable. But that was another side of Sherry. When she would get a little schnockered, you didn't necessarily want to be around her.
She was she was a light switch. There were times where I drank with Sherry. In fact, when she was dating Shunji, the super ninja,
yes,
went over to, and the Nasty Boys were just starting, and so went over to their place, and Shunji and Sherry were there, and we're drinking sake. First and only time I've ever drank sake in my life. Sherry drank a lot. Well, to be honest, I think we all drank a lot of sake. But I never saw that I never saw the scary Sherry that night. I don't know, maybe because we were all just in the same place. We didn't have any place to go. Yes, I did end up spending the night there on a couch because I had way too much sake. but it was just fun. It was just laughter and so forth. So going into it, and maybe this is how Sherri was, whatever her mood was going into her drinking, the drinking just magnified it. So if she was in a bad mood and she would drink, stay away from Sherri Martel if you don't want to deal with shit.
You know, the flip side of that, when she was in a good mood, she was great. She was just hysterical. She and Candy Devine, you mentioned Candy before. They were very, very good friends. Loved to party, loved to have a good time. Sherri had a wonderful sense of humor. And yeah, it was Jekyll and Hyde.
Well, and I got to believe that Medusa has to give Sherri credit for helping to mold her and her career. Because when Medusa came in about 86, some of her first matches were against Sherri, and who better to learn from? Now, I'm not saying that it was that Medusa's success is all due to Sherri. Medusa deserves it on her own. But those two, after a short period of time, Medusa, paid her dues and so forth. But Sherri helped to mold her. She helped Shawn Michaels with his career. Sherri was, really until this episode, I'm putting it all together. Sherri really, really was a goat.
Yeah.
I mean, oh, wow.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the issues that she's had, and I mean, people know about it. It's, it's not any, secret that anybody's kept. But before we go here, guys, and wrap it up, I do want to, can you guys clarify, or Mick, whoever, can you clarify the way that she left the AWA from what, because I know it's kind of an uncomfortable thing to talk about, but I feel like it's something that needs to be broached if we're going to tell the story of Sherri Martel in the AWA.
To be perfectly honest, I've heard stuff. I don't want to even profess to be not only an expert on why she left or how she left. And again, I started right after she left. So I may defer to Joe on this one if Joe is comfortable enough to, address what we know.
I'm right around with you, Mick. Sorry, you're not Nick Bockwinkel. It was very sudden and very abrupt. And I honestly do not know that backstory. I don't even know what the rumors are. All I know is she turned up with the WWF and went on to an incredible career. So I'm sorry, I can't fill in any blanks. I just know that I missed her when she wasn't there.
I mean, Chris, this may be, something you want to jump in on. I mean, as far as the rumors that you heard.
Well, I don't really want to get into it, but yeah, I just know that it was so abrupt, and I mean, it was like she was there one day and she was gone the next, and it kind of seemed like that was par for the course with a lot of people. In like things were not necessarily acrimonious at the end when people left. But when it's literally like the next day, like if something had happened between Vern and Sherri or the booking office, or, there was something with the drinking and the outside, like I don't know, but it seemed like it was just like, yeah, she came out of nowhere and showed up in the WWF. So it just seemed like so abrupt. So I was just wondering if there was anything that had kind of been floated around when you guys were, kind of the ancillary pieces.
Well, what I can say, Chris, is that she didn't leave the AWA because of the AWA. She left because she had
an offer from New York. Okay.
Yep.
There is nobody in the AWA during the 87-ish time period that wasn't thinking or working towards going towards the WWF.
Right.
Period.
Okay. Yeah.
Period. The AWA was on the decline. Excuse me. and the WWF was becoming a beast. So, whatever may have happened at the front office, I don't know any particulars, but if it was over money, Vern wasn't going to be able to pay her. And whatever Sherri asked for, I can confidently say Vern wasn't going to give her what she was asking, if that was indeed the scenario. I had never heard any nefarious story of her leaving. I was just like you, and I was working there. All I know is just 1 week there was no Sherri Martel at interview day, and to be honest, it saddened me because she was always a treat to be around.
Chris, I want to tell a quick story here, and I don't think it's speaking out of turn because it's been talked about before, but it goes to not only Sherri's shortcomings or personal demons or whatever, but just how amazing she was. There was a back-to-back Steel Domain wrestling weekend. I forget where the first date was. It was a spot show somewhere in Minnesota, and then the next day, Sherri was going to be working at Treasure Island, and she was going to be coming out and managing Lenny Lane. Well, prior to the spot show the day before, the promoter went to pick up Sherri at her hotel in downtown Minneapolis, and Sherri was in no shape to do anything. She had been partying a little bit the night before, and literally was out on her feet. And it got to the point where on the way to this show, which is probably about an hour or so plus from the Twin Cities, Sherri is completely out in the front seat. I mean, she is out, totally unconscious. And the promoter, of course, is starting to worry about her. And when they got to the building, I said, "Where's Sherri?" He says, "She's out. She's out in the truck right now. She's gone. She's blitzed. I don't know if she's going to be able to make an appearance." And so I said, "God, do we go out and approach her? What do we do? This is not, I don't want her to wake up a raving maniac, So it's intermission, go out to the truck to get Sherri. And the promoter, Sherri says, "Is the show going to start?" Promoter said, "Sherri, we're at intermission already. You're up next." The switch went off, like Joe said. She got into the building, into the dressing room, put on all her stuff, got out in a managerial capacity. You would have never known that anything had transpired prior to that in a negative way. She was spot on. The next day, she's managing Lenny Lane at Treasure Island, and she did not remember the night before. It was, to me, it was absolutely extraordinary. She said to Lenny, she said, I think I've managed you before. And I said, "Sherri, you managed Lenny last night." She did not remember. She had that blackout, but she was such a professional. I mean, good or bad, that the switch went on, but she did not remember any of it the next day. And, I just remember her being really sorry and saying to the promoter, "Please bring me back. This has been a rough weekend for me." Sadly, Ed, we never had the opportunity to bring Sherri back, but it was just extraordinary to watch that whole thing play out.
What is her legacy going to be, guys?
Oh, man.
Or what is her legacy, or what is her legacy for you?
Outside of the friendship, her legacy in the ring was that she was,
well, the whole thing, though, because you guys interacted with her in a way that a lot of people didn't. So, Mick, I want to get yours, and then Joe, get yours. How are you guys going to remember her?
She was my friend. She was a dear friend. I get choked up seriously talking about her. She was wonderful. We interacted well. She confided in me about a lot of stuff, in her personal life or concerns with Vern or whatever. So from a personal level, I was very fortunate. I was blessed to know her beyond a professional level. In the ring itself, unmatched talent. There she is with another guy that left us too soon, Road Warrior Hawk. And I absolutely love that picture. And I think this sadly kind of speaks to some of the pitfalls of pro wrestling when you see those two standing together and realizing they should be here now and they're not. But as a professional, as a manager, as a wrestler, as a personality, Sherri Martel, absolutely stellar, class of her own.
She was a loose cannon wild child that, in my opinion, was the best female talent of her era because she could do it all. I could probably extend that to say more than just her era, but sadly her era was too short before, sadly, the drug overdose. But Sherri was as good as it got. I brought it up earlier about her being, hate to say the female GOAT, because I don't think she'd like that. She really was just a GOAT. Take out the male part of it. As an overall talent, Sherri was that damn good. Whether it was commentary, managing, refereeing, even, working some of those, anything that she did in professional wrestling, Sherri was as good as it got, period. She deserves the credit and respect that finally she is getting.
Well, on that note, guys, let's go ahead and wrap up the Sherri part. I'll let you get some last words at the very end here, Mick. But let's. You guys want to do some shout outs? I know that we hadn't really talked about it, but we do them. Do you guys want to do one this week, or what do you think?
I have one.
Okay.
And Joe, you know this guy very well. Aaron Eichhorst, Cujo, a former independent wrestler here in the upper Midwest, that we ran into him the other night at a benefit show. He looks great. Looks like he could still get into the ring, but it was like old home week. And my God, Chupik, he was all over you. So happy to see you. But Cujo, kudos to Cujo, and we'll see you again down the road, buddy.
It was great to see Cujo again. My shout out goes to Glenn Braggett. Glenn is a longtime wrestling fan, has had me on his podcast a couple of times, and interacted with him leading up to that event that Mick and I were at this weekend. Glenn, thanks for listening. Appreciate it.
And mine's going to go to someone who just became a member of our AWA Unleashed fans page on Facebook. If you haven't, go ahead and become a member there, because we have some fun discussions, and we usually have some clips and things that kind of go with the podcast there. But Bill Dundee, a lot of people know, part of the Memphis territory, Jerry Lawler and Billy Joe Travis, things like that. But yeah, Bill Dundee, glad to have you part of our AWA Unleashed fans, and welcome aboard. We're always happy to talk about your accomplishments. So there it is. There's our shout outs. I want to thank Soda Stick and 7th Avenue Pizza. If you guys have not already, subscribe, rate, review, especially on YouTube. Keep an eye out for new things that we've got coming down the pike. That's about all I can say. We're still working on some of the technicalities. It's very vague, but we've got some good things coming up in the next, hopefully, month or so. Hopefully within the next couple of weeks. But we've got some things. But before we wrap it up here, Mick, I know that again, this is going to Sherri Martel. I apologize.
Well,
go ahead, Joe.
I just wanted to tell everybody that no, we don't have a turkey on a pole, but happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Yes, thank you. Because I forgot that this is airing like 2 days before Thanksgiving.
Wanted to do that. So many great memories of Thanksgiving night at the AWA at the Civic Center, battle royals that led to the big Christmas show. So I wanted to get that in because
great call, Joe. Great call.
Carry this to the end with our dear friend Sherri.
Great call, Joe.
I echo that, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And in conclusion, as we wrap up talking about Sherri Martel, you said it, Joe. I mean, when we do this podcast and we talked about her, and we didn't talk about all her titles and her matches. You can Google that. You can watch YouTube. You can do whatever you want there, and you get the picture of Sherri Martel, the professional. We wanted to talk about Sherri Martel, the person. All of us have our hiccups. All of us have our warts, and Sherri was no different. But when you look at the total package, what you got with Sherri Martel on the overall, her intensity, her drive, her sincerity, her toughness, her beauty, her professionalism. Sherri Martel, God bless you. Thank you for your friendship. And I hope you're resting in peace, although you're probably raising a little bit hell up there. Love you, Sherri.